This morning at 10:47 a.m. Eastern Time, a former president of the United States came within one sentence of being handcuffed and escorted to a jail cell. Not in a hypothetical scenario, not in some legal analyst's prediction, in an actual federal courtroom, on camera, on the record. A sitting judge looked directly at Donald Trump and said 5 words that no American president, current or former, has ever heard in a court of law. Sit down or go to jail. Trump did not sit. What happened over the next 12 minutes may go down as the most direct challenge to judicial authority we've seen in modern American history. I've spent the last several hours going through every page of the court transcript, watching every available clip, reading every legal analysis I could find. And I'm going to walk you through exactly what unfolded moment by moment, because the headlines do not capture what actually happened in that room. But first, you need to understand what led up to this explosion. For anyone following Trump's legal battles, courtroom tension isn't new. He's been combative before. He's made comments. He's arrived late for attention. He's used recesses to deliver sound bites for cameras outside. There's a pattern, a rhythm, a predictable playbook. Show defiance. Stay just inside the line. Leave with headlines. That's what everyone expected yesterday. That is not what happened. Something shifted. And if you know what to look for, the warning signs were visible hours before Trump even entered the building. The night before, his Truth Social account lit up with unusually aggressive posts. His legal team reshuffled at the last minute. Never a good sign. Extra security personnel arrived at the courthouse early. And perhaps most telling of all, his attorneys went silent. No media statements, no pre-hearing confidence, nothing. Here's something I've learned from covering these cases. When Trump's lawyers go quiet before a major court appearance, it almost always means they're bracing for something they can't control. By early morning, courthouse staff reported unusual activity in the defense staging area, emergency strategy sessions, tense conversations, the kind of last-minute huddles that only happen when lawyers are expecting one of 3 things: a devastating witness, a surprise ruling, or a client who's about to go completely off script. Nobody knew which scenario was coming. Some suspected all 3 were about to collide. What observers could see was this: Trump's demeanor had changed. His posture was different. His energy was different. And when a criminal defendant shifts their behavior unexpectedly, even subtly, experienced judges notice. Judge Angoran was watching. Now, let's go inside. Picture the scene. Trump is seated at the defense table. Navy suit, composed expression. The prosecution is questioning a key financial witness. Standard procedure, routine testimony. Nothing unusual. And then, without warning, it happened. Trump didn't lean over to whisper to his lawyer. He didn't scribble a note. He spoke out loud, sharp, direct, aimed straight at the witness. That's a complete lie. A total fabrication. Those words cut through the courtroom like a blade. Every attorney froze mid-sentence. Every spectator held their breath. Every camera operator in the overflow room leaned in. The court reporter's fingers hovered over the keys, and Judge Angoran slowly removed his reading glasses. What he said next wasn't a polite reminder. It wasn't a gentle suggestion. It was a command backed by the full weight of federal contempt powers. Mr. Trump, you will not speak unless addressed. You will not interrupt these proceedings. Is that understood? Now, in any normal case, that would be the end of it. A defendant would nod, apologize, move on. But this is not a normal case. And what happened next stunned everyone in that room. Trump didn't apologize. He didn't nod. He leaned back in his chair, looked toward the ceiling, and said loud enough for the court reporter to capture every syllable, "This whole thing is a joke. A complete joke. Let that sink in. A defendant in a federal fraud trial just openly mocked a sitting judge on the official record seconds after receiving a direct warning. These were not the words of someone seeking leniency. These were the words of someone testing whether anyone in that room actually had the power to stop him. Judge Angoran had that power, and he used it. Over the next 4 minutes, the judge issued 3 escalating warnings. The court transcript confirms this. The first came immediately after Trump's initial outburst, the interruption of testimony. The second came moments later when Trump audibly scoffed and muttered "kangaroo court" while the prosecutor was speaking. The third came when Trump physically stood up from his chair. And this is when the judge said something that will be studied in law schools for decades. "Mr. Trump, sit down immediately. Sit down now, or I will have you removed from this courtroom and held in a detention cell for the remainder of today's proceedings." Detention cell. Those 2 words landed like a thunderclap. Think about what just happened. A federal judge presiding over an active criminal trial just told a former president on the record that he would be placed in a jail cell if he didn't comply. This was no longer a warning. This was a direct, legally binding threat with immediate consequences. Trump's lead attorney, Alina Habba, immediately stood and requested an emergency sidebar. The judge granted it. For 12 agonizing minutes, lawyers huddled at the bench, whispered arguments, urgent negotiations, the kind of legal triage that happens when a case is seconds away from going completely off the rails. And during all of this, for the entire 12 minutes, Trump remained standing at the defense table, arms crossed, jaw clenched, refusing to sit. Every eye in that courtroom was on him, every second stretched. The tension was suffocating. When the sidebar finally ended, Habba walked back to the defense table and leaned close to Trump's ear. Witnesses say she was speaking rapidly, urgently, almost pleading. Trump shook his head. She tried again, more emphatic this time. He looked away, and then this detail matters. She placed her hand firmly on his shoulder. That physical touch, that direct personal intervention, that's what finally made him move. Slowly, reluctantly, Trump lowered himself back into his chair. Let me be absolutely clear about what just happened. Trump's own legal team had to physically intervene to prevent a former president from being hauled out of a federal courtroom and placed in a holding cell during his own fraud trial. We were one stubborn moment away from an image that would have defined American legal history. Now, a lot of people will see this as courtroom drama, a spectacle, political theater, but that's not what this was. What happened today was a direct, calculated test of judicial authority. And how Judge Angoran responded tells us everything about what's really at stake. Let me break it down. Trump's behavior wasn't simply disrespectful. It was strategically destabilizing. Every interruption, every comment, every moment of defiance was designed to undermine the legitimacy of the proceedings. And Judge Angoran understood that immediately. His response wasn't emotional. It wasn't reactive. It wasn't personal. It was surgical. He didn't issue vague warnings. He cited specific contempt statutes. He referenced concrete incarceration precedents. He spoke with the kind of precision that leaves zero room for misinterpretation. And, more importantly, zero room for appeal. Former federal prosecutors speaking to journalists on background described Trump's conduct as calculated provocation. They believe his goal was to create grounds for a mistrial, to manufacture reversible error, to bait the judge into an overreaction that could be used on appeal. But Judge Angoran didn't take the bait. His responses were legally airtight. His demeanor was controlled. His authority was absolute. And that tells me something important. This judge anticipated exactly this scenario. He was prepared, he had a plan, and he executed it flawlessly. Here's what most people watching this story will miss. For decades, Trump has operated under a simple assumption: he can outlast, outspend, or overwhelm any opposition. That courtrooms, like boardrooms, eventually bend to pressure. But federal judges don't bend. They hold lifetime appointments. They're insulated from political influence. They answer to the Constitution, not to polls. And they possess something Trump has rarely, if ever, encountered in his entire life: enforceable authority. Today, Judge Engoron made that authority crystal clear. His warning is now permanently part of the official court record. It wasn't meant to embarrass Trump. It was meant to establish beyond any doubt that this courtroom will not tolerate obstruction, intimidation, or theatrical disruption. In plain English, you are not special. You follow the same rules as everyone else, or you face the same consequences as everyone else. Here's what most coverage of today's events is going to miss entirely. This wasn't an isolated outburst. This wasn't a defendant simply losing his temper under pressure. To understand what's really happening, you have to look at the full picture. And when you do, a pattern emerges. Let me walk you through what happened in a single 6-hour window. During the morning session, Trump interrupted sworn testimony, mocked the judge, and refused a direct order to sit down. At lunch, he posted multiple attacks on Judge Engoron through Truth Social. His legal team filed formal motions questioning the judge's impartiality. And outside the courthouse, he told assembled reporters that the trial was, quote, a disgrace to everything America stands for. All of this, same day, same 6 hours. When Trump moves this many pieces simultaneously, courtroom disruption, social media attacks, legal filings, media statements, it signals something much larger is being orchestrated. Legal analysts are now considering 3 troubling possibilities. First, he may be laying the groundwork to boycott future court proceedings entirely, to simply refuse to appear. Second, he could be deliberately trying to provoke a mistrial through sustained disruption, force the judge's hand, create chaos. Third, and this is the scenario generating the most concern among legal observers, he might be attempting to manufacture a constitutional crisis by openly defying a direct court order. Now, here's some context that helps explain why Trump is behaving this way. He's under more legal pressure than any former president in American history, and he's trying to navigate competing demands from every direction. His attorneys want him silent. No more contempt risks. His political advisors want him defiant. Strength sells. His donors want him sympathetic. The persecuted martyr. His base wants him fighting loudly and visibly. He's trying to satisfy all of these audiences while facing multiple criminal indictments across multiple jurisdictions. And when defendants in that kind of pressure cooker make sudden dramatic moves, they're rarely operating from strength. They're operating from desperation. Now, I want to step back for a moment and talk about why any of this should matter to you, regardless of your politics. What we witnessed today is a stress test, not of one man, not of one trial, but of the entire American legal system. Can a former president, someone with enormous resources, enormous media attention, and an enormous political following, bend the courts to his will, or does the system hold? Judge Engoron answered that question today. The system held. The trial proceeded. The witness testified. The rules were enforced, and a defendant who believed he was untouchable learned in the most public way possible that federal judges have real power. That matters. It matters for every American who believes that justice should apply equally. It matters for every case that comes after this one. It matters for the basic principle that no one, no matter how rich, how famous, or how politically connected, stands above the law. So what happens next? Honestly, that depends entirely on one person, Donald Trump. If he complies with court directives going forward, this moment might be remembered as a turning point, a line that was drawn and respected. But if he defies the court again, Judge Engoron has made one thing absolutely clear. He is ready to act. Detention is on the table. Real consequences are on the table, and the judge has demonstrated publicly on the record that he will not hesitate. Reports tonight suggest Trump's legal team is scrambling. There's unusual quiet from Mar-a-Lago. And in my experience, when Trump goes silent after a confrontation like this, it usually means he's recalculating, weighing options, measuring risks. Today, he learned something he has resisted his entire life. Federal judges have real authority, courts have binding power, and even former presidents must answer to the law. Let me leave you with 3 key points from today. 1. A federal judge issued a direct, legally binding threat to jail a former president. This was not symbolic. This was not procedural. This was a sitting judge telling Donald Trump, "Follow the rules of this courtroom or go to a cell." 2. Trump's own legal team had to physically intervene to prevent him from being removed. That alone tells you how close we came to an unprecedented moment in American history. 3. This was not an accident. Trump's behavior appears to be part of a larger strategy, testing limits, manufacturing grounds for appeal, or setting the stage for something bigger. But today, the court pushed back harder than he expected. This story is far from over. There will be more developments, more confrontations, and I'll be covering all of it. If this breakdown helped you understand what actually happened today, not just the headlines, but the legal mechanics and what they mean, consider subscribing. And I'm genuinely curious. In the comments, tell me what you think. Does Trump comply from here, or are we heading towards something even bigger? I'll see you in the next